So as I abruptly stopped in the last PowerPoint, there are two different types of innate behaviors, taxis and kinesis. Taxis is a change in direction. And this is some automatic movement towards or away from a stimulus. And so towards the stimulus is positive taxis, and away from the stimulus is negative taxis. So a way you could remember that is, let's say you are the stimulus and you're trying to get somebody to come towards you. It's positive if they come towards you, positive taxis and automatic movement. And it's negative if they move away from you. Some examples of this are phototaxis, photo meaning light, and taxis, so either movement towards light or away from light is an example of phototaxis. And chemotaxis, so either movement towards a chemical or away from a chemical can be taxis. Excuse me. Kinesis, oh, sorry, still talking about taxis. Fish undergo something called rheotaxis, and rheotaxis is movement against the current of a river. And they do that so that way they can get food most easily. Kinesis is a change in the rate of movement in response to a stimulus. So here you have the sobug, which is underneath this lovely leaf. It's moist, it's dark, it's awesome, and you have, it stays still. So it's a lower rate of movement underneath this nice cozy leaf. In the dry open area, there's a higher rate of movement, but there's no actual direction in that movement. It's very random. And the idea is that the higher rate of movement in the dry open area, which is icky to the sobug does not like the dry open area. So the higher rate of movement means that eventually the sobug will find the lovely moist site underneath the leaf and find an environment that that the sobug enjoys. Once it finds the environment it enjoys, rate of movement will slow down. It will stay in that environment. So what I want you to do for your third study guide question is to tell me the difference between taxis and kinesis. Okay, so you also have the link to this PowerPoint, so feel free to pause the video, pull up the PowerPoint link, look at slide number 10, which is the slide before this study guide question, and contemplate the difference between taxis and kinesis. So there's some more complex innate behaviors, such as migration. So migration is actually kind of this combination between innate and learned behaviors, but birds that have been bred and raised in captivity, so they've never been outside of captivity. The time of year when it's time for them to migrate, you actually can observe this restlessness in them. So they start to like flap their wings, and it's as if it's time for them to migrate, which is fascinating because how would they know? They've been born and raised in captivity. It's kind of interesting. What also is an innate behavior in migration is that the different animals that migrate navigate by either the sun, the stars, or even the magnetic fields of the earth. And that is not learned, that is innate behavior. So some various migratory animals are the monarchs, which is absolutely beautiful if you can observe the monarch migration, or the sandpiper. So imprinting is a combination of innate and learned behavior. So during imprinting, there's social attachments during this specific critical period. So there's a certain time during the organism's life where they have to learn this behavior. And so again, this imprinting has both learned and innate components. And so this was really figured out by Dr. Konrad Lorenz, who did some famous studies with geese and goslings. Not Ryan Gosling, but actual baby geese. That's the term for baby geese, is gosling. And what he did, again, all of the experiments in animal behavior just sound like scientists teasing animals or being really mean to them. But basically what he did is that there is a critical period um, during goslings development where they figure out who their mother is. So here you see the gosling, and they figured out that this geese is their mother, and so they're going to follow this goose, and depend on this goose for feeding and to learn what do you have to do to become a goose. What's all the stuff involved in goosery? Okay, and that there's a critical period where these goslings figured out, you are my mama. Okay, what Konrad Lorenz did is during that critical period with these goslings, he removed their mother, mean, right? And imprinted upon these goslings that he was the mother goose, like in the fairy tale. Okay, so kind of mean, right? And so these goslings grew up to be geese that actually ended up thinking that they were humans and had these human components and could not interact with other geese because they had a Swedish father as a mother who wasn't a goose. Really not cool what he did. So the proximate cause of imprinting, of this critical period in imprinting, is that the young geese observe their mother moving away from them and calling them, so they'll follow them and start to follow that mother goose and decide that that is their mother goose. The ultimate cause is geese that follow and imprint on their mother receive more care and learn how to be a goose and can survive in the great goose world. So they're not all meanies like Dr. Lorenz there. Conservation biologists have taken advantage of imprinting by teaching young whooping cranes how to migrate. So teaching them the migration route. So as I said, migration is kind of a combination between innate and learned behaviors. And so a pilot actually, I love this, wears a crane suit. So this is the pilot interacts with the crane and then teaches the crane to migrate and is acting as a surrogate parent. Isn't that amazing? So interesting. So more about the critical period. The critical period is this sensitive phase for optimal imprinting. So some behavior must be learned during this receptive time period. So it's like there's this window of opportunity when the behavior must be learned. If you don't learn it within that window, sorry, Charlie, you're out of luck. You can't learn that behavior. Pretty intense idea, isn't it? So we're going to discuss this idea of the critical period in songbirds. So birds learn their songs during this critical period. They have, here's the egg, they hatch, and then for the first 50 days is a sensitive period where they are listening. They're passively listening to the song. If they don't hear the song in that first 50 days, they can't sing their song. Isn't that sad? Sad. Okay, and then as a juvenile from 50 days to about a year, they're working on their template and their sub song, and then as a mature adult, it's crystallized into a final song. But this first 50 days, that passive listening is their critical period. So if from when an egg hatches, the first 50 days, if they are not around the same species of bird that they are and hear that song, then they will never sing their song. This kills me. So there's something called a brood parasite. It's the cuckoo. It never learns the song of their own species because the cuckoo will take their eggs and put it into, like sneakily put one of their eggs into another brood, into another nest. And then the other bird will be like, oh, sweet, I somehow magically got another egg in the middle of the night. I will raise this as my own. And then it hatches and it's actually the cuckoo bird. And the cuckoo bird never learns the song of their own species as a nestling. And in the cuckoo bird, this is the exception to the rule. The cuckoo bird, song development is totally innate. It is not a learned behavior. So in the cuckoo bird, they don't have a critical period. Okay? It's not learned. It's innate. It's inherited. It's like our ability to cry. They just know how to sing. So what do you think? Do you think there's any imprinting or critical period in humans? So that's what this bottom uh, idea is about. Sorry, that's not what that is, but I want you to think about that. Is there any sensitive phase, sensitive time period in humans where you have to learn a behavior, and if you don't learn that behavior within that time period, you will never learn that behavior? That's what we mean by critical period. That's what we mean by imprinting. Does that exist in humans? So your fourth study guide question is I want you to tell me, how is song development in the majority of birds? So don't think about the cuckoo bird because that is an exception to the rule. But how is song development in the majority of birds both an innate and a learned behavior? So let's talk about learned behavior. There are a few different types of learned behavior. There is associative learning, and this is where you learn to associate a stimulus with a consequence. So there are a few types of that. Operant conditioning, which is trial and error learning. You try something and you find that it works or that it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, you're going to try it again. If it doesn't work, you'll try something else. If it does work, you'll do it again. Trial and error. We've all done that, right? And you associate behavior with either a reward or a punishment. We do that at the high school, don't we? So if you're late to class, you get a detention. So you're going to avoid being late to class because you want to avoid getting a detention. Another good example is learning what to eat. So if you eat candy, it tastes good. If you eat candy covered in dirt, it does not taste good. So what are you going to eat? Classical conditioning is this idea of Pavlovian conditioning, if you've ever heard of the famous study with Pavlov's dogs. So this is where you associate a neutral stimulus with a significant stimulus, so a stimulus that should have nothing to do with some kind of behavior. So let's talk a little bit more about operant conditioning. This is how some people get their pets to do crazy things like, play the piano or, make their ducks play a kiddie piano. Or if you have ever gone to one of these animal shows, or some people went to Mystic Aquarium on Monday and got to see the sea lions do all sorts of tricks. They did that through operant conditioning. So the Skinner box, this is the major tool that psychologists use to perform operant conditioning experiments. The mouse is inside the box. There is a speaker in case you want to use sound as some kind of stimulus. There are two levers. Signal lights, a lever. On the bottom is an electric grid that that generates shock. So you can shock the mouse. And then there's a pellet dispenser as well. So basically, and there's air holes, by the way. It's not suffocating the mouse. The mouse learns to associate the behavior. So you either maybe signal a light or some kind of sound, some kind of stimulus, and then you want the mouse to press the lever after it sees something, And if it presses the lever after the correct stimulus, you reward the mouse with food. If the mouse does something wrong, shock generator. And it's not horrendously cruel shock. It's not, like electrocuting the mouse. It's just a little buzz. And that's how the Skinner box works. So you do something good, you get a reward. You do something wrong, you get a punishment. And I believe that as teenagers, you probably could come up with 5 million examples of that in your life currently. Classical conditioning is best illustrated with Pavlov's dogs. So this is connecting some kind of reflex behavior to the associated stimulus. So Pavlov did this experiment where he took his dog and rang a bell and then fed him. And he did this over and over and over again. So he rang a bell and fed him, and rang a bell and fed him, and rang a bell and fed him, and rang a bell and fed him. And then eventually what happened is that he would ring a bell and his dog would start to salivate all over the place. Okay. And the idea behind that is that because the dog heard the bell ring and he thought, I'm about to get fed. This is great. And Pavlov eventually would no longer feed the dog after ringing the bell. I mean, he would feed his dog, but not always after ringing the bell. He connected this neutral stimulus, ringing a bell, with a significant stimulus, food, to get this behavior out of the dog, salivation. Can you think of some examples of classical conditioning in your life? How about when the bell rings at school? You want to get up and go to your next class, right? I'm sure C block students, or when you're in your C block class and the bell rings, there's like a tiny part of you that's kind of like, oh wait, is class over? Wait, no, not yet. Can you think of any other examples of classical conditioning? When there's some kind of neutral stimulus that makes you do some other type of behavior. Other types of learned behavior, one is habituation, and this is when you lose your response to stimulus. So for example, if there's a funky smell in the classroom and I've said to you, don't worry, you're going to be habituated to it. Or you're probably very used to the chaos that is in our hallways during passing period, and a new student comes in and they're totally bewildered by what's going on. Doesn't bother you, does it? Because you're used to it. But if a new student would be totally going crazy because of all the stimulus in the hallway. Another way to put it is that crying wolf effect. Have you heard the story about the boy who cried wolf? Well, this is habituation. Okay, so the boy would come down from the fields every day and say, there's a wolf, and all the villagers would go up to the field and say, hey man, there's no wolf up here, and he'd be like, oh, yeah, right, there's no wolf. And then one day, there actually was a wolf, and I think he died. Fairy tales are weird. Anyhow, that's the cry wolf story. But the idea is that eventually the villagers ignored the kid because he kept saying there was a wolf, right? And habituation is the same idea, is that you decrease your response to the repeated occurrences of the stimulus. So my example of that is that my alarm goes off all the time and I no longer hear it. And I bet you can relate to that as well. And that's habituation. You no longer respond to a stimulus. Can you think of other examples of that? The reason why, the ultimate cause of habituation, is that it allows you to disregard unimportant stimuli. So you can imagine if you're an animal in the forest, there's lots of stimuli around you. There's falling leaves, there's stuff darting all around. If you thought everything was some kind of danger, you paid attention to every thing that was stimulating you all around you, you wouldn't sleep, right? That would be bad. So you need to learn how to disregard some things. Another learned behavior is problem solving. So we think we're the only animals that reason, but check out chimpanzees. Okay, he's using this little, probably a piece of bamboo to go down into the anthole to take out ants. So he's using tools. The sea otter is a very crafty fella. Check out this problem solving. I love this one. So, got a small primate there. The bananas are out of reach. What's he doing? Ah, so good. The crow actually using some string there, tying some string. So other animals can problem solve. So your study guide question, your fifth study guide question is to list the 4 types of pure learned behavior discussed thus far, describe them, and give a descriptive example. So there are types of social behaviors as well. And these are interactions between individuals that have developed as evolutionary adaptations. Some examples of social behaviors are communication, even language, so me talking to you at this very moment. Social behavior. Enjoy. We have agonistic behaviors, dominance hierarchy, cooperation, and altruistic behavior. So let's talk about those in a bit more detail. Language. Oh, I love this. You guys are going to love this. Be sure to ask your teacher tomorrow about the waggle dance. We'll be sure to demonstrate. So this is how honeybees communicate with one another. They dance it out. It's a dance party in that hive, I tell ya. They dance to communicate the location of their food source. And it's called the waggle dance. I'm telling you, gotta learn it. It's the new Dougie. So a worker comes back from a really sweet food source, and the other workers cluster around and like, come on, tell us about it. What'd you do? And so the worker does this roundabout dance. And he's like, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you. So he does this roundabout dance. That's his way of singing, like clearing out the dance floor. Look out, I'm about to tell you. And he does the waggle dance. And so he does around and around. And in this middle, he does a little shimmy. Just a little shimmy. And then he'll rotate at a 30-degree angle to say, all right, guys, you got to go 30 degrees from the beehive. The sun is here. You got to go 30 degrees from where the sun is. That's where I found a really awesome patch of clover. You're going to love it. It's delicious. It's full of nectar. Okay, so his first move up is pointing the direction of the sun, so everybody has the same frame of reference. Then he'll go back down to say, okay, this is away from the sun. So he'll waggle, do a little shimmy down, and then around. And then he'll rotate, see this rotation? And that exact angle out is the direction where the great food is. Amazing. Bees are really cool. They really are. And they do a lot of other communication in dance form. That wasn't a joke. That's actually real. They really do dance it out. There is communication by song in both birds and insects. So birds use song to identify other species and to make sure they're mating with birds of the same species. So could you try to remember what kind of pre-zygotic isolation that is? Birdsong is also part of their mating ritual. So that is, of course, a mixture of learned and innate behavior, as you learned about earlier. And birdsong, of course, has to be learned during that critical period. The insect song is part of the mating ritual. And insect songs, it's innate, it is genetically controlled, so that is not a learned behavior. So agonistic behavior, these are these threatening rituals, and these are usually symbolic. So as crazy as this polar bear fight looks, actually usually no harm is done to either polar bear. It's usually this posing, I'm the alpha, I'm the alpha. And eventually, just by that posing and standing up to one another, will one turn out to be the dominant and the other one submit to the other. So it's this kind of threatening ritual. Um, some reasons behind agonistic behavior could be over territory or over competitor aggression. Um, that's where you get the agonistic behavior. Dominance hierarchy is also looks like agonistic behavior, and this is that social ranking within a group. And we kind of think of that as pecking order. So kind of the alpha male or the alpha female, and then so on and so forth. And that can be determined through agonistic behavior. Cooperation. So now we're going to the softer side of social behavior. Cooperation is when animals work together in coordination. So hunting is a really great social behavior strategy. So you see this pack of African dogs, and individually they could not attack this wildebeest, but if they work together, they can hunt and actually take down this wildebeest. Same goes for these white pelicans. They kind of work together to herd together a school of fish. So cooperation is a huge benefit for hunters. Altruistic behavior is this really cool thing. It's when individual fitness is reduced, but increases the fitness of the recipient. So if you think about it, let's put it in the most simplest terms ever, as if you see somebody, they're about to get hit by a car, and you push them out of the way, but you get hurt yourself. That's altruistic behavior. Okay? Fitness, the recipient is better because of you, but you get hurt. And this happens in nature. So what's going on there? And what we think happens, why this happens, is because of what's called kin selection. And kin selection is that you're increasing the survival of a close relative. So you're not just thinking about yourself, you're thinking about your DNA, and you're thinking about passing on your DNA to the next generation. So that's why altruistic behavior could be going on in nature. So you see altruistic behavior happening a lot in animals that live in groups. So study guide question 6, which I kind of just answered for you, is how does altruism have adaptive value? So really my question is, why would an animal in the wild be altruistic? So, this could be your good answer to somebody who's being a jerk, and they say, well, survival of the fittest, baby. And then you could go into this big long spiel about altruism, having to do with survival of the fittest as well. Basically, be nice, right? Okay. So in order for these social interactions to occur, you need to communicate. And besides song and dance, musicals aren't for everybody. So there are pheromones as well that can help communication in these social interactions. And pheromones are chemical signals that stimulate a response from another individual. There are alarm pheromones and there are sex pheromones. So in this example here, you have minnows widely dispersed in an aquarium, and then you put the alarm pheromone in, and they all just clump near the bottom and reduce their movement. The picture kills me. I just find it funny. Just put like alarm pheromone and they cluster in the bottom. So that's that. There is some idea that there is sex pheromone as well in humans. Not a lot of strong evidence there as of yet that I know of, but I'm definitely open to people doing their own research. Sex pheromones would be chemical signals. They're definitely in animals that stimulate a response from other animals. So that's it, people.